The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
We've been covering a lot of these failed lethal injection executions as part of death penalty, the carrying out of death penalty sentences, and increasingly there are problems. I mean, listen, there have been problems with lethal injection for a long time, but increasingly there are problems because of lack of availability of some of the chemicals that are used. There have also been a lot of incidents where people fail to die for 40 or 50 or 60 minutes after these injections have been given, and that starts to create questions about cruel and unusual punishment, aside from the fact that I would argue killing someone counts, even if it goes perfectly as planned. But the news is that the state of Oklahoma is now going to start using nitrogen gas to execute death row inmates going forward. Nobody has tried this so far in response to the difficulty of obtaining these lethal injection drugs. Now, Oklahoma hasn't even carried out an execution in more than 3 years because of these very high-profile mistakes that have been made, including one that a grand jury has called an inexcusable failure that took who knows how long before it was ultimately called off. So the problem here is that there's really no protocol for using nitrogen gas that's been created yet, right? So with each one of these drugs, in theory, there's a protocol that dictates exactly how much per inmate weight and in what order and how is it all meant to be administered. And often it still fails, right? I mean, we have numerous incidents where people either fail to die or die after what seems to be a pretty agonizing 20, 30, 40, or even 50 minutes. With nitrogen gas, there's not even an execution protocol that's been put in place yet, but I guess it's an attempt to try to deal with the problems that have been ongoing and growing with lethal injections. What about just saying, hey, you know what, we're not going to do it anymore, right? What about that as the path forward?
I feel as if we're searching for the most humane style of execution, and we've been doing that for a long time. Back in the day, they would, hang, draw, and quarter people, and they would burn people at the stake, and progressively we got a little bit more humane, you could say, with it, even like with the guillotine, that's like a quick chop of the head.
Assuming it works correctly.
And then, we move on to electrocution, we move on to lethal injection. People are trying to find a way to make it done humanely and get it over with quickly. Yeah. And this is just the next step, I think.
But it isn't really the next step to get rid of the death penalty.
Yes.
Like, that's really, as a society, we should just recognize that the concept is actually what's inhumane, and we should just do away with it altogether. And I still am sort of in the camp that we're going in that direction, because we've had never more than today have we had more states say we're no longer doing the death penalty. So I still see us as going in that direction, but it's probably going to be a longer path than, for example, the path to national gay marriage, which really accelerated very, very quickly, and now you can't have state bans on same-sex marriage anymore. I think it's going to be a much longer process than that, and it already has been, given how long we've seen some states start to do the outlawing of the death penalty. But I'm still hopeful.
Yeah, but if the nitrogen gas works for Oklahoma and the inmates don't seem to experience any pain and they actually go out in a somewhat euphoric way.
A euphoric stupor?
I think that could last for another 10 or 20 years, don't you?
Well, I mean, there are many other reasons beyond just that some of these chemicals haven't been working super well to get rid of the death penalty. Like, anti-death penalty activism isn't going to stop if nitrogen gas seems to work pretty well, Yeah. So I'm still hopeful, and obviously we want to avoid any execution. If there are going to be some, I get it's like I almost feel like I'm buying into the concept of the death penalty when I say a more humane execution is better than a less humane execution.
If there is one,
If there even is one. So I don't even really like saying that, but certainly dying in a euphoric stupor on nitrogen gas seems better than lasting an hour while they poke and prod and put different chemicals into you, and you appear to be sort of asphyxiating yourself.
Although there is one caveat to this, which is that you have to kind of participate in your own execution in order for it to go smoothly, because you have to breathe. And if people are fighting for their lives, they may choose to hold their breath for a couple of minutes, and that has to be interpreted as cruel and unusual punishment.
Well, I mean, I don't want to get too morbid, but I guess what would happen is you hold your breath long enough to at most pass out, and then your breathing resumes involuntarily, and they just put the mask up to your face.
We can't have that.
And that's probably it. But yeah, it doesn't seem good, but I don't know that it'd be much of a strong effort to resist. I think ultimately it's going to happen. There's a French baker who is not adhering to the rules of work-life balance in France, and he is being slapped with a 3,000 euro fine for working too hard. This is exactly what people like Bill O'Reilly talk about when they say they're so lazy over there in Europe. He was baking, and the biggest problem was that he had his shop open too much, 7 days a week, and the laws require 1 weekly day of rest for businesses. And he now is being defended by the mayor of the town where they live, saying, listen, it's a touristy place. It's good that the business is busy. He should be allowed to stay open 7 days a week if he wants. It's actually sort of necessary if you're doing tourist business to be open all the time, because tourists come year round every day of the week. And there are a lot of people who are functioning in support of him, but he is in violation of those labor laws in France. I kind of love this story. I mean, listen, I actually do think that the business should be allowed to be open 7 days if they want to. I think that's a little heavy-handed. I think what's good is limiting any one person's work, right? And the problem, though, is when you have a small business, if you don't have employees, the only way to be open 7 days a week might be for him to be there 7 days a week. So I sort of understand the point of the law, but based on our American sensibilities, it does seem sort of heavy-handed.
Yeah, I feel like it's okay to have working limits for employees.
Yeah.
But if this is a small business and he's the only one working there, maybe it's his call to determine how much he wants to work. And I think it's reasonable to assume that there's no coercion there. It's not like his boss is making him work extra hours.
Sure,
when he
he's the
doesn't want
boss.
to.
Yeah, and
He's
I
the
think
boss.
that you could have a law that distinguishes and says that as an employee who is in a sort of what the equivalent of a W-2 situation, you can't force them nor threaten their jobs because they don't want to work 7 days a week. I think that that's perfectly reasonable. As an entrepreneur and business owner, I don't know. It feels a little bit much to say he can't be open 7 days a week. I don't know. I'm having trouble with
What's
it.
the justification for it? Are the French saying that this is for his own well-being?
Yeah, basically.
Or is it more so that it's in order to create fair competition so that other bakeries aren't incentivized to also work 7 days a
I've
week?
not heard that. I've
that
not
would
heard
create
that
a ripple
argument.
effect?
Yeah, no, I've not heard that argument. I've heard that it is just, it appears to be just part of this work-life balance, and France, I believe also, now I might be getting mixed up in which countries have done this, but I believe it's France that has also passed a law saying employees who work like regular hours can't be penalized for not responding to email like after 7 p.m. or something like that. Like if they want to, they can, but they can't be penalized for that. And they also, I believe, have reduced the normal working week. Is it to 35 or 32 hours? I don't remember now. But anyway, France is doing some interesting stuff. I find it all very, very interesting.
I would be so angry if I worked extra hard
in your own
put
business.
in those extra hours.
Yeah.
And then instead of making more money, I lose money. I would be irate.
Well, that's, I think, the argument, right? Which is you're working longer to make more money, but in the end, you'll end up with less money because you'll be fined. So you might as well just take that 1 day a week off. Big picture, I agree. It's terrible to be going in and opening a bakery 7 days a week.
Yeah.
I mean, they start very, very early, and it's not good. It is actually terrible. I just am unsure about the government telling entrepreneurs when they are allowed to work based on what they want to do. Remember Clock Boy? Clock Boy is that Muslim kid who was arrested after taking a homemade clock to his school. And there has now been a dismissal with prejudice by Judge Sam Lindsay of Dallas. And the fact that the case has been dismissed with prejudice means that there can be no more lawsuits filed against the family. I'm sorry, by the family. In regard to this case. And the part of this was that they were sort of going on a tour of firing lawsuits over what took place. And now that the dismissal with prejudice has taken place, they're not going to be able to do that anymore. Apparently, the judge felt that they were sort of clogging up the legal system here. And they also ordered that I think that they might be liable for legal fees going forward as well. How long ago did the Clock Boy thing even start? I don't remember now.
It feels like 2 or 3 years ago. I imagined you covered it at the time.
Oh, of course. Absolutely.
What was your take on it?
My take was that, if a white kid had brought a homemade clock to school, would there have also been the reaction that it might be a bomb? And I couldn't say one way or the other, but it felt weird. It definitely felt weird.
It's hard to say, but also I think the thing kind of looked like a bomb. It was in a suitcase. There's a whole bunch of wiring.
I don't deny that it was
this
weird.
little timer thing.
Yeah.
I think there should be some precaution there, right?
I don't disagree that it's not exactly your grandmother's grandfather clock. Well, I guess it would be a grandmother clock in that case. It's not the type of antique clock or the type of clock that everybody universally identifies as a clock. I get that. But I still, at the time, and the exact original details now sort of elude me, I remember thinking at the time that there was definitely going to be a different reaction if it was an upper class white
that's
kid
probably
who brought this thing in. You know, it wouldn't have
Right.
been exactly the same.
But he got to meet with the president. He spoke with Obama for a few minutes.
Yep.
But I think the problem too is that his address was leaked online.
Oh,
Someone like tweeted it out. You
he
can't
was
have
basically
that.
doxxed.
And that led to the moving of the family. They
Yeah.
moved to Qatar.
And it's, I mean, are we ready to say that this is the end of the Clock Boy saga?
Yeah, I mean, if they can't file any more lawsuits, I think it is.
Yeah, I think this might be the last we hear from them until the kid becomes like an amazing engineer
Oh, yeah.
and comes up with some amazing invention or
Probably
something
incredibly
like that. Who
smart,
knows?
yeah.
Okay, what else do we have going on this week? We've got the Friday show. We have some new cryptocurrency content that's going to be coming to YouTube very, very soon. Next week, we are going to have an interview with a real exorcist.
Yes,
Now,
Rachel Stavis.
by real, all I mean is the exorcist isn't doing it as a goof. They believe that they are really an exorcist, but I don't really believe there is such a thing as exorcism. So by definition, I don't believe in the concept of a real exorcist.
Yeah.
I just mean someone who believes themselves to be an exorcist, as opposed to like if I were to pretend to do an exorcism, I wouldn't be a real exorcist in that I don't believe that I'm actually doing anything.
Yeah, you should ask Rachel to give you an exorcism right on the spot via Skype if she's able to.
If she's able to, yeah, I don't know how that works. I know that Reiki can be done remotely now, which is super convenient for the practitioners because they can just take your credit card right over the phone and move on to the next client or sucker, as I would call it. I don't know if it works the same way with exorcism, but we will find out. That'll be very interesting next week, and I think it's a good couple weeks coming up on the show.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.